Let's talk houses this morning with the one and only Charlotte Mabry of the Charlotte Mabry team. No surprise to me when Charlotte walked in the door this morning. She said, you know what, I want to have phase 2 of a conversation that we had last month. If you missed it last month, we talked about some changes that have been made now in commissions, especially for buyers agents. But Charlotte's a researcher, so she's done her research.
I have. And while there's not really been a change necessarily in commission, there's a lot of conversation about that. And as always, commissions have always been negotiable, so that hasn't really changed. But it's been interesting as to the conversation on who's going to pay whose commission. And much of this conversation is about thinking, well, maybe the buyer themselves should be responsible for the buyer's agent's commission. And so I did do some research because we talked about whether or not that might actually come to pass. And so I did a little research and to see whether or not people were going, the sellers were going, hey, I'm not going to pay that commission anymore. So since we were here together before 30 days ago, there have been a little over 700 listings come on the market. And so I went through every one of those yesterday and I found three people who said, nope, I'm not going to pay that commission to a buyer's agent. And one of those three in the remarks said, well, I will pay it, but I'm just not going to commit to how much. So the reality is there were only 2 people that said, no, I'm not going to do that.
So in case someone's watching and they're scratching their head because they didn't catch part 1 of our saga, so you corrected me rightly. If you're the buyer's agent, you will still get a commission. The question is just, will the seller pay it, which has always been the tradition, or will the buyer now provide that?
Correct. And so the change that I do see coming for a buyer, and I do think this is a good change, in the past, buyers have been able just to call a number and say, hey, 123 Main Street, I like it, let's go look at it. And whoever they got on the phone is who they went to look at the property with. And if they wanted to buy that property, whoever it was they got on the phone helped them. The danger in that is you don't know who it is that you're working with there. You just call them on the phone. And now today, we're going to be asking buyers to make a commitment to pay a commission in case the seller does not pay it. Okay. Now, we've just seen through my research, now would it change? Could it change? Possibly. But for today, in most cases, the seller is going to pay that. But we're going to be asking you as a buyer to make a commitment to us to cover our commission in the case that the seller does not.
Okay, so does that mean that, let's say that I'm in the market to buy a house and I come to you as my buyer's agent, and you would say, all right, what's your budget? And I would say I can pay up to X amount of money. And then you would tell me what your commission fee would be.
Correct.
And that means that you're going to definitely not show me houses that are above that threshold of my budget unless you see that the seller's agent is paying that commission.
That sounds like a really good plan. And so yes, that would be the process. I probably would ask you to give me permission in writing to say, hey, I'm not going to show you houses that would go beyond that threshold. But in most cases today, I think it is a little more of what we have had in the past because sellers are still understanding the value of having a buyer's representative work with that buyer.
Right.
Because the process is a little convoluted still. You need someone on that other end, and sellers are realizing that they don't want a buyer working to buy their home that isn't getting advice and help and direction on the other end.
Also, if you are not going to be paying the buyer's commission, you're just dwindling your pool of applicants.
No question, no question, especially when you see your competition just in the past 30 days of new listings out of 700 and I think 760 something. Only 3 people said no. So, I mean, you've got a lot of competition.
Okay, let's talk about competition in terms of who you want to be your representative as an agent. You say a buyer's agent is critical.
It is critical. You know, a lot of people stress over selling their home and they interview agents and you know, want to know what you're going to do for me. But people have rarely had those conversations with their buyer's representatives, and now they really need to. And a good example of that is 2 years or so ago, the market was vastly different than today. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about today's market before we end. But multiple offers on houses, people, 20 and 30 offers, people fighting over houses. Well, in this past year, that has not been the market. But we had a house listed in this past year where an agent working with a buyer helped the buyer write an offer that was way over asking price. And the comment from the agent was, I just wanted to be sure that our offer won over all the offers. And of course, their offer was the only offer we had. And so it was great, and we were, representing the seller. But unfortunately, that buyer paid more for that property than they could have paid because of maybe poor advice.
So let's talk about the current standing of the market, and let's talk a little bit about the networking that exists between agents, buyers, and sellers here.
Sure.
Because y'all have to be looking not just at today's sale, but at the community and down the road. You're in the relationship building business.
No question. And I mean, if I am that person that everyone cannot stand to work with, I'm not going to do a very good job for my client if everyone runs when they hear my name, right? So we don't want that to happen. The market today, we have about 16% more listings on the market available to purchase today than we did this time last year. So there's more inventory out there, so multiple offers. We do see them occasionally, but not often. Interestingly enough, there's only 4% more sales. So there are a lot more houses on the market than there are going under contract. And so that means days on the market, that's longer. Right now we're 50 to 60 days on the market on average for houses, where it had been 5 to 6 days.
Right.
So it's a lot longer on the market. What's driving that is housing affordability or lack thereof. In my 38 years of doing this, there's never been a time where houses were less affordable than they are today. And that's based on price of house, interest rate, and then what people's incomes are. And you look at all of that together, and for the first time in my career, it is more affordable to rent than it is to buy. And
that's a statement. That's quite a statement, even though rent is not a constant.
Rent is not a constant, and it doesn't build your wealth over time.
Right.
Just even owning a house, your first year, we're still seeing about 4% a year appreciation. So if you bought a $500,000 house, that's $20,000 of equity that will come into your pocket most likely after that first year. So I mean, nowhere else can you gain.
That's not sustainable, really, though, from a buyer's perspective.
From a buyer's perspective, absolutely. For so many years, 4% a year appreciation was the norm over this 30-something years. But in the past 5 to 8 years, we've seen massive appreciation, and that's really where it got out.
Yeah, we had that 20% jump, and then you're building 4%
every quarter.
and then you're building 4% on that 20% jump.
Absolutely. So it became unaffordable. So I don't think we're going to see prices plummet. I think we'll see them stabilize.
So again, talking with the seller's agent on that side of things, if you are looking to sell your house, you need to talk about, do you need money? Or do you need a quick sell? Because pricing it right is really important.
Price overcomes all objections. So there is a price where people will fight over your home, and there is a price where it will sit forever, and you need to know which is which.
I will not ask you to take a political stand, but since you are a researcher, in political years, in election years, do we tend to see any shift with the housing market?
We tend to see people sit on the sidelines, because it's interesting how people think who is president makes a difference. And it does, I guess, in your mind, but in the reality of things, there are too many checks and balances, thank goodness, in our government, that the change of one person doesn't make that much difference. And particularly with the candidates that we appear to have right now, we've seen them before. We know what each of them is like. So I think people are less interested in that, but are still sitting on the sideline, because I think there's less of presidential and more of affordability.
Well, if you want to get in touch with someone who will represent you, whether you are the buyer or the seller, she would love to hear from you. The whole team would there at the Charlotte Mabry team. Their phone number is 593-5588. Online at charlottemabryteam.com. And since wherever you call home, eventually tonight you'll come home and sit around your kitchen table and all talk, how appropriate that we get to give you the dad joke of the week this morning. So here's our funny friend Jason to give you a little bit of humor as you go through your day. Your
Dad Joke of the Week, brought to you by West Yellow Knife Trading Post.
Hi there and welcome to this week's Dad Joke of the Week. Do you think a kangaroo can jump higher than the Empire State Building? Well, sure it can. The Empire State Building can't jump. What goes woof woof, tick tick? My new watchdog. Thank you.
Jason, come on, that was bad, really bad. Anyway, for something good though, come to West Yellow Knife in Dalton. You better get it when you see it at the knife.